Have you ever just sat in absolute silence? Not the kind where you're scrolling through your phone with the volume off or waiting for something to happen, but real, deep silence. The kind that almost feels alive. If you have, then you know that stillness isn't empty. It's full. It's heavy with something bigger than you, bigger than words, bigger than anything you could ever explain. That presence, that's God. Not an idea, not a feeling, not some distant concept. It's real, and it's right there. The moment you try to name it, it slips away because words are too small for something so endless. It's like trying to hold the ocean in your hands. You can't. It's beyond thought, beyond time, beyond anything your mind could ever wrap itself around. But here's the problem. We don't see it. Not because it isn't there, but because we've spent our whole lives being told who we are, what we are, and where our limits lie. We've been trained to think small, to believe we are nothing more than what we can see and touch. We've built walls around ourselves without even realizing it. Walls made of our past, our mistakes, our fears, our labels. And those walls, they make us feel separate from God, from truth, from who we really are. But what if I told you that everything you think limits you is a lie? What if I told you that you are not trapped, not small, not cut off from the presence of God, but completely surrounded by it, held in it, woven into it? That the only thing keeping you from experiencing that reality is the belief that you're separate from it? And here's where it gets even crazier. You don't have to fight to break down the walls. You don't have to strive, push, or prove anything. The more you try to grab hold of this truth, the further it slips from your grip. Because the presence of God isn't something you achieve, it's something you surrender to. It's in the stillness, in the moments where you stop trying to figure everything out and just let Him be who He already is. It's in the quiet, when you stop wrestling and just let yourself be held. So maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to stop chasing and grasping for what's already right in front of you. Maybe it's time to let go and finally see that you were never separate, never alone, never forgotten. You've been in the presence of God all along. But to truly be free, you have to loosen your grip. You have to let go of the doubts that whisper lies, the fears that keep you frozen, the ideas and judgments that have chained you to your past. The weight you've been carrying, those worries, those regrets, those unspoken struggles, they've been in your hands for so long that you've started to believe they belong there, but they don't. Real freedom begins when you dare to release them into hands bigger than yours, hands that formed you, hands that know the real depth of your heart, the true purpose of your life, the path you were meant to walk. This isn't about giving up, it's about giving over. It's about surrendering to a love so vast, so limitless, that it holds no fear. Surrender isn't weakness. It's not waving a white flag in defeat. It's laying everything down at the feet of Christ and saying, here it is. Everything I am, everything I'm not, everything I can't carry anymore. And when you do that, something shifts. Your mind, once tangled in anxiety and control, clears. Your soul, once weighed down by fear and pride, becomes open, pure, ready to see what real freedom actually looks like. Because here's the truth. The moment you stop gripping so tightly to what you think you need to hold, something incredible happens. Peace starts to seep in, not the kind that comes and goes with circumstances, but a peace so deep, so steady that nothing can shake it. And joy? It stops being something you chase and starts being something that simply is. A joy that remains even in hardship. A strength that doesn't collapse under pressure. And suddenly all the battles you've been fighting, within yourself, within your circumstances, don't seem so overwhelming anymore. Not because everything instantly changes, but because you do. Because when you stop wrestling, when you stop trying to force everything to make sense, when you stop gripping onto what you were never meant to carry, you make space. Space for grace to move. Space for God to transform what you never could. We spend so much of our lives trying to hold everything together. Our plans, our expectations, the outcomes we think we need. We push, we strive, we carry the weight of every decision, afraid that if we let go for even a moment, everything will fall apart. But what if the peace we long for isn't found in doing more, fixing more, or figuring it all out? What if it's found in releasing what was never ours to carry in the first place? God never asked us to be the architects of our own security. He never told us to measure our worth by how well we manage every detail of life. Yet we exhaust ourselves trying to control what only He can hold. We chase certainty, obsess over outcomes, and let fear take the driver's seat, never realizing that true peace isn't something we earn. It's something we receive when we finally stop fighting for control. Surrender isn't giving up, it's waking up. Waking up to the truth that God's hands are stronger than ours, His ways higher, His love deeper than anything we could ever construct for ourselves. It's realizing that real freedom isn't found in having all the answers, but in trusting the one who does. When we let go of the need to force things to work out exactly as we planned, we make room for something greater, something that doesn't depend on us, yet includes us in the most beautiful way. This kind of trust isn't passive, it's an active choice. It's the moment we stop trying to outrun our fears and instead place them in God's care. It's choosing to believe, really believe, that He is working, even when we can't see it. And in that trust, we find something that changes everything. A peace that doesn't rise and fall with circumstances, a strength that doesn't fade when life feels uncertain, a joy that isn't tied to what we achieve, but to who we belong to. God isn't calling us to a life of endless striving. He's inviting us into a life of real, unshakable peace. A life where we no longer have to carry the weight of every outcome, but can step forward, free and confident, knowing that we are held, we are loved, and we are never alone. We think freedom is something far off, something we have to chase, earn, or fight for. But the truth is, it's right here. It has always been. The moment we stop trying to control every detail, the moment we stop gripping life so tightly, we step into a freedom we never knew was so close. But fear doesn't let go easily. It whispers that surrender is risky, that if we stop managing everything, life might unravel. But that's the lie that keeps us trapped, exhausted, and endlessly striving for a security we were never meant to create for ourselves. Real surrender isn't losing. It's stepping into something better. It's moving from a life of anxious control to a life of quiet confidence, a deep trust that God's design is far greater than our limited vision. It's shifting from the weight of trying to hold everything together to the lightness of knowing we were never meant to carry it all in the first place. And when we finally release the need to force life into place, something incredible happens. We stop feeling like we have to push every door open. We stop wrestling with the fear of what might go wrong. We learn to walk with a sense of ease, not because life is perfect, but because we know we are being led. The walls we thought were blocking us weren't walls at all. They were just places we weren't meant to go. The struggles that seemed like detours were actually shaping us, guiding us towards something far better than we could have planned. Everything we need has already been placed along our path. We don't have to strive endlessly or scramble for control. We don't have to exhaust ourselves trying to make life fit into our expectations. God has already gone before us, arranging every step with purpose. And when we trust that, the endless cycle of worry begins to fade. The what-ifs lose their grip. The pressure to make everything happen on our own disappears. Instead of living bound by fear, we start moving in step with grace. And this is what we were made for, not a life of stress and striving, but a life that reflects God's love, a life that breathes with purpose. We weren't placed here to shrink under the weight of expectations or to be defined by our struggles. We were made to live, to grow, to shine in the way only we can, to be part of something so much bigger than ourselves. When the noise quiets, when we stop filling every moment with anxious thoughts and let stillness settle in, we begin to sense it, that steady, unshakable presence of God, guiding us, holding us, leading us exactly where we need to be. Even the hardest moments, the ones we don't understand, are shaping us, not to break us, but to refine us, not to make us smaller, but to help us become everything we were created to be. And in this surrender, we find something we never expected, not loss, not emptiness, but fullness, a life that isn't built on fear, but rooted in faith. A life where every twist, every turn, every unknown is held in hands far greater than our own. A life where we are not just surviving, but truly living, moving forward with a grace that never leaves us, always drawing us back to the one who knows the way. Stop holding on to the weight that was never yours to carry. Release yourself into the hands of the one who sees beyond the confusion, beyond the fear, beyond the walls you've built to protect yourself. God already knows the way ahead, even when you feel lost. Letting go isn't giving up, it's breaking free. It's choosing to set down the burden of guilt, doubt, and the belief that your mistakes define you. It's understanding that you are more than your failures, more than your struggles, more than the voice in your head that says you're not enough. God sees past all of it. He sees the real you, the one made with purpose, the one He loves without hesitation. We spend so much time trying to fix, prove, and control everything, but transformation doesn't start with doing. It starts with seeing yourself the way God does, whole, loved, enough. When you stop measuring yourself by your past or your flaws, you open the door for something greater. And in that surrender, a shift happens. Peace stops being something you chase and starts being something you live. Not an escape, not a break from reality, but a deep, steady knowing that you are held. And with that peace, your vision changes. You start seeing light where there used to be shadows, hope where there used to be fear, purpose where there used to be doubt. And as God's love fills you, it overflows. It doesn't just change you, it changes everything you touch. The people around you feel it. The world around you reflects it. You stop seeing through the lens of fear or shame, and instead, you see through the clarity of His truth. That is where real freedom begins. And when we finally let go, something incredible happens. Surrender isn't weakness, it's stepping into a greater strength. It's loosening our grip on the version of ourselves we've been trying to hold together and trusting that God's hands are steady enough to carry us. We stop wrestling with expectations, with the pressure to be more, do more, fix more. We open our hearts and allow God to shape us, to lead us, to fill every space we once tried to control. And in that surrender, we find freedom, not from responsibility, but from the constant strain of trying to hold everything together on our own. Anxiety loses its grip. Fear fades into the background. The weight we've carried for so long, the need to prove, to perform, to be seen as enough, begins to fall away. And what's left is peace. A deep, unshakable peace that doesn't come from circumstances, but from knowing, truly knowing that we are held. Life starts to move differently. We begin to flow, not by our own force or effort, but by grace. There's a rhythm, an ease, a quiet confidence that wasn't there before. Even the smallest moments, conversations, simple joys, the warmth of the sun on our face, become filled with meaning. We no longer chase happiness or exhaust ourselves trying to manufacture peace. We receive them effortlessly as gifts from the one who has always been offering them. And in the stillness, in the moments when we finally pause long enough to just be with God, we feel it. A love so complete, so overwhelming that words fail to capture it. A joy so full that it spills into every corner of our lives. No achievement, no possession, no fleeting success could ever compare. Because what we found isn't temporary. It isn't something the world can give, and it isn't something the world can take away. It's the steady, unshakable presence of God, and once we rest in it, we are never the same. And so we come to this moment, not at the end, but at the beginning. A beginning where the weight we once carried no longer defines us, where fear no longer dictates our steps, where the restless striving for control gives way to the quiet assurance that we are already held. This is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. It's about finally exhaling, finally releasing, finally stepping into the freedom that has been ours all along. God's love is not something we chase, it's something we awaken to. It is steady, unwavering, and always present, calling us beyond the limits we once believed in. And when we surrender, not in defeat but in faith, we find that we are not falling, but being caught, not lost, but finally home. So take this moment. Let the stillness settle deep. Let the presence of God surround you, fill you, remind you of what is true. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are already in the hands of the one who knows your path, your heart, your deepest longings, and in Him, you are free. Thank you for walking through these thoughts with me. I pray that this truth takes root in your heart, that it transforms not just your mind, but your entire being. And now let's turn our hearts to God in prayer, not as an obligation, but as a moment to rest, to surrender, and to receive all that He is waiting to give. Father, in the hush of this moment, we step away from the clamor, the endless striving, the restless ache for something just out of reach. We come, not to drown the silence with more words, but to be filled by it, to let stillness make space for the truth we so easily forget. You are not distant, not hidden, not waiting for us to prove ourselves worthy before you draw near. You are here, closer than our own breath, nearer than the thoughts that flicker through our minds. We do not have to reach for you, only to stop running from the one who has never left. Yet, Lord, we confess we have lived as if you were far away. We have mistaken your nearness for absence because we have been taught to see with eyes that trust only what they can measure. We have built walls of doubt, of fear, of striving, of shame, thinking they would protect us, not realizing they have only kept us bound. But even now, those walls are nothing but shadows. They have never kept you out. You were never behind them. you were always within. Teach us to surrender, not as those who have been defeated, but as those who have finally found freedom. Freedom from the exhausting burden of control. Freedom from the weight of proving, of earning, of holding everything together with weary hands. You have never asked us to carry what we have spent our whole lives gripping so tightly. You do not demand perfection, only trust. You do not require strength, only the willingness to let go. And so, Lord, we release it all. The fear that clenches our hearts, the burdens that have worn us thin, the illusion that we must hold everything together or it will all fall apart. We open our hands, our hearts, our very souls, and we fall, not into emptiness, but into you. And as we do, something shifts. The world does not suddenly become simple, but the weight lifts. Fear begins to loosen its grip. The endless chase for certainty grows quiet, and we begin to see peace was never a destination to arrive at, but a presence to rest in. Joy was never something to chase, but something that rises when we stop running. Freedom was never found in control, but in the release of it. Lord, you are here, in the silence, alive with your presence, in the surrender that feels like breathing after holding it in for far too long. In the stillness where we no longer strive to be loved because we finally understand we already are. And now, as we step back into the world, let us walk differently, no longer weighed down, no longer grasping for what was never ours to hold. No longer searching for you as if you were missing, but moving with the rhythm of grace carried not by fear, but by trust. Living, not as those trying to find home, but as those who have finally realized we have never been anywhere else but held. Amen.